And I knew that. I knew that I knew that. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Just another struggling writer. The Beleaguered Author's one-stop shop for commiseration and hopefully inspiration. My name is Carrie Scher, and I am just another struggling writer. And today I just want to give a quick update about the state of my current work in progress, Seekers of Empyrean. Seekers of Empyrean is of course my Monster of the Week inspired urban fantasy about a young woman with a rare magical ability who is recruited by a secret government agency to hunt down and stop a growing threat to her magical community. And that logline is changing. We'll get to that. If you've been keeping up with my last couple of videos, you'll notice that there is quite a sizable gap between the last two. 4 months to be precise. And I regret to say that those 4 months were not productive for me in terms of writing. Not productive at all. In fact, I have not written a single word since February 1st. I did check my writing session spreadsheet that I've been keeping, and yeah, February 1st was the last time I added words to my draft. I'm not going to rehash anything I talked about in my previous video, but suffice it to say, I've just had a lot of issues going on this spring, mainly a lot of work-related stress that kind of sent me down a spiral with my mental health. And when my mental health is bad, my creativity is the first thing on the chopping block. It's the first thing that suffers. And I could tell right away that it was starting to be impacted because I was getting writer's block with the scene that I left off on. And I do believe that writer's block exists. I know that a lot of people can use it as a crutch or an excuse to not write, but this kind of writer's block was actually pretty new for me to experience. It was not necessarily mental health related, at least I didn't think at first. It actually felt more like a skill issue. I was having a really hard time proceeding with the scene because I just didn't know how. I was struggling to find the words, and it made me question whether or not I even had the technical expertise to write the scene that I was envisioning. Essentially, the main character's grandmother kind of drops a bomb on her, and the main character was then going to go, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I already knew that. And it was going to be this moment, this kind of counterpunch where we, the audience, learned something that is brand new information to us, and that should have been brand new information to the main character, but she already figured all that out, and the grandma just dropping this on her was going to be like a, you're just doing this to manipulate me kind of moment. And I struggled, and I struggled, and I struggled, and I struggled. And then as all of the stresses that I mentioned in the last video started to kind of pile on, I realized that I could not find my way out of this problem because I didn't feel creative. I didn't feel smart, and I really did not feel like putting in the mental labor necessary to navigating that challenge. So that is where I left my draft on February 1st. And I probably went a good month and a half, 2 months, without even thinking about it. I definitely threw myself down the rabbit hole of other activities while I was in this slump. A lot of video games, a lot of anime. I wasn't really reading a lot of things because I truly was being super avoidant for anything related to my creativity. But all of that started to change when I started watching, for entertainment purposes, book reviews. I am a big fan of Reads with Rachel, and I am a big fan especially of her rant reviews of certain kinds of books. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, and I know it's probably in a little bit of bad taste for me as an aspiring author to enjoy rant reviews, but what can I say? I am who I am, and I like what I like, and I enjoy watching long-ass movie-length breakdowns of books I will never read personally and probably wouldn't appeal to me anyway, and especially when they're delivered by someone who is funny, like Rachel is. So I was kind of binging some of her backlog of videos, and unfortunately came away with an unintended consequence in which I started to apply some of her criticisms against my own book, which obviously hasn't been published. It hasn't even been finished. But some of the things that she would comment on, I would start to think, am I guilty of doing this in my own book? Is this something that a reader potentially would have a similar issue with? And so I really started thinking critically about my book and how it would be received to someone who's never read it before, never heard of me before, and is just coming into this for entertainment purposes. And I started to realize some pretty glaring issues that frankly have almost always been there, but that I had maybe convinced myself weren't that big a deal or weren't important because they didn't fit with my original vision, or that I would just figure out as I went. I've talked a little bit about this in previous videos, but one of my major problems with this book has been, first of all, the middle section, and second of all, the big B plot, the big character-driven plot. But for me, it was just a secondary plot that was going to be a through line of the first trilogy of what I hope will be a 9-book series. Part of the reason that I ended up suspending my second draft was because I had tried to reintroduce this B plot in a way that was more integral to the whole book. And it ended up kind of sucking all of the oxygen out of the room and taking focus away from the A plot. And ultimately, it started to feel like it was no longer the book I wanted to write. I'm going to try and speak lightly so I don't give away too many spoilers, but essentially that B plot is the main character's mother went missing 10 years ago, and she always chalked it up to a drug addiction, but maybe that's not the case. Part of the reason I was really struggling with it is because it was really important to me to write a specific dynamic between the main character and her mother, and a specific kind of feeling. And that is still important to me. There are specific aspects of their dynamic that I want to be plain throughout the entire series. And my fear was that by making this disappearance plot so important to my main character's arc, I feared that that would screw with that dynamic, that it would drive it in a direction that I didn't originally envision or intend. But unfortunately, what I came to realize after watching these criticism videos is that without that arc driving Arceli, my main character, she doesn't really have a plot or a purpose or anything kind of motivating her. And going back to the log line, it's kind of clear that there really aren't any stakes for her if this plot is downplayed to the level that I wanted it to be. And so I kind of had a crash out in the middle of my little hiatus about, if this book needs that arc in order to work, is this even the book I'm supposed to be writing? Because I don't want this arc to be important and to be that important in this book. It's definitely important later, but I wanted this book to just focus on the main character's introduction into this new world that she's just joined. But again, there is no denying that I have been struggling to find the stakes, find the reason that my main character is even participating in this plot at all. Find her motivation, find what matters to her. I would come up with a couple of things, but they always felt paper thin. They weren't truly her motivation. And while there are writers who could write this in such a way where she's trying to convince herself that she doesn't care, again, that isn't the dynamic that I really was going for. And so I had a couple of weeks, probably in the middle of April towards the beginning of May, where I was seriously on the cusp of shelving Seekers of Empyrean, potentially for good, because I just felt like my original vision and what the book needed to become in order to truly fulfill its potential were at odds with each other. And it was a real nightmare scenario, to be honest with you. While I was on hiatus, I hit the 2-year mark of working on this project. And to put in all of that work and all of the mental labor that I've done trying to make this book a reality, it was really disappointing. It was really upsetting. I felt like, I can't help it, I did feel like it was a waste of time. And I know that it's not, I know that up here, but like, in here, it felt like a waste of time. I had a hard time. In fact, I was once again trying to come back from my mental slump, and then I just spiraled yet again because I was like, I can't, I'm not a good writer. I'm obviously still at the beginning of my journey, and this is just another failure, and I need to move on, and all of these things. And it was upsetting, to say the least. I put it away from my mind and didn't think about it for a couple of weeks. And then I took it back out of the box and I re-examined it yet again. And I ended up making both a realization and the decision that if I want to be a writer, if I want to be someone who can get published, I need to accept that what's good for the book might not always necessarily align with my goals and intentions at the beginning of the process, and I need to be able to adapt to what the book is telling me it needs as opposed to what my needs are for the book. Obviously, I'm the writer and I should be able to dictate what it is, but I'm here to tell you that in its iteration as it was when I left off in February with the vision and the goals that I had for the draft, it was not going to be a good book. It lacked something critical, and that is Arceli's emotional arc, Arceli's motivation and plot throughout the book. I had even asked in the writing Discord that I'm in, is it okay to have a main character who doesn't really have much motivation or anything going on for her? And, the responses were yes, but you do need XYZ. And I knew that. I knew that I knew that. I didn't want to accept it because I didn't want to make this B-plot the focus so early. I didn't want it to change the dynamics between Arceli and her mother. Once I realized that that mindset was holding not just me back, but the book back and holding my progress back, my development as an author back, I let it go. I had to let it go because it can't be that important. That singular dynamic cannot be so important as to tank the whole book. It can't. I can't be that precious to it. It is truly a darling that I had to kill. And it was a slow and painful death. I think I've been fighting against this realization for pretty much 2 years, but I also think that embracing it is going to make it just so much more, I know I've used this word in other contexts, but it's going to make it more dynamic. It's going to make the character more dynamic. It's going to make the mystery more dynamic. It's going to make the book feel much fuller and real and juicier and interesting. And so while, yes, I'm losing a little bit of that jadedness that I wanted to be a part of my main character's personality, it wasn't right. It wasn't right for this book. It might be right for other books, but it's not right for this one. And so with that, I have a new logline that I'll be using for Seekers of Empyrean. Let's see if I can remember what it is first. And I will be incorporating some feedback that I solicited earlier this year about the term Monster of the Week. If you didn't see that short that I posted, I think it was in January, basically I was just trying to find out what Monster of the Week elicits in your mind, because to me, I was using it as a stand-in for episodic, but what I found is that when people hear Monster of the Week, they expect monsters, and there's not really any monsters. It is truly just episodic. So my new logline is Seekers of Empyrean is a modern world urban fantasy about a young woman with a rare magical ability who is recruited by a secret government agency to hunt down a dangerous fugitive in exchange for help solving her mother's mysterious disappearance. So as you can tell, most of it is still the same, and I found that to be really important because it gets rare magical ability put in there, which is important and the whole reason she's recruited in the first place, secret government agency, dangerous fugitive being hunted, and what the character's stakes are, most importantly, which is help solving her mother's disappearance. Now, I wish I could say that that was the end of my problems. With the acceptance of this new plotline as the emotional backbone of the story, I needed to do some major rethinking, once again, about that middle 40% of the book. The beginning is staying largely the same, barring a few tweaks to some reveals, and the ending is staying identical. But I really struggled with the middle in both the first and second drafts. And while I thought I had it all sorted out for draft 3, again, this change meant that I had to do some rethinking. Because while I do accept that this B-plot is important and needs to be woven in throughout the book, the second draft iteration didn't strike quite the right balance either. And so I'm still moving away from draft 2, and I needed to come up with how I was going to proceed with making it feel like a natural part of the book rather than something that was gradually taking over like some sort of invasive species. And so I had a series of questions to answer for myself. Some of those questions were, what does Arceli know and when does she know it? How does she find it out? What does the secret government agency know and how do they find it out? And specifically the midpoint. The midpoint was another area of consternation for me in the last couple of drafts because it just wasn't exciting enough. Nothing really happened. I know the midpoint is supposed to be a moment that turns the main character from reacting to the circumstances around her to acting on things and driving the plot plot forward. And it's also supposed to be a moment where your antagonist flexes their power. My only issue has been that my antagonist does not appear on page for the main character until around the 65-ish% mark, where there's a big confrontation. I was very, very adamant, and I felt very, very strongly that that is the moment where you finally meet this person and actually have a confrontation. And so the 50% mark, I needed to make it about the antagonist and about something that the antagonist did without having a head-on confrontation so soon. And ideally, the A plot and the B plot should intersect at the midpoint. And I feel like on that last criteria, I did that really well in the second draft, but again, it drove the plot in a completely different direction. That was the biggest question I had, was how do I make the midpoint exciting without making it a direct confrontation? How do I make it motivation for the main character to switch from reacting to acting? And how do I connect it to certain events that will lead into the big confrontation? So most of May was spent answering those questions for myself. And every time I would solve a problem, it would connect immediately to the next thing, which I then had to solve. And I kind of parsed out that middle 40%, just asking myself questions. How would she react to knowing this? Who does she talk to get this information? How does she even get pulled into this moment? And on and on and on. And eventually I got to a point where I think I've got it. Which leads me to this moment now, wherein I am cautiously optimistic about the sequence of events. And to be sure, that process came with some fight. There was one particular moment where I was trying to sort out how does the midpoint connect to that big confrontation. There's a very, very, very critical moment where the main character leads a very, very critical piece of information that affects everything that comes after that moment. And I couldn't figure out how to reintroduce it because of all of the changes that came before. What I had originally planned was no longer appropriate. And I had to dig deep. I went all the way back to like the very first outline, one of the very first original ideas I had for the plot surrounding this moment. And I thought, yes, this was abandoned early on, but is this now the better route to take as opposed to what it became in the actual outline and then in the subsequent drafts? Again, I resisted. I did not want to go that route. It gave certain characters motivations that I wasn't prepared for. It didn't fit with what I wanted. I wanted other characters to have certain flaws and arcs that this would somehow damage and all of these other things. And I convinced myself to think of something else. But then the more I thought about it, the more I got ideas for how it could play into the sequel and the book after that and the book after that, and how I could make it work and how it would actually make a lot of sense because this character is going to be a POV character. You know, he's going to need an emotional arc too, and this could actually play into his emotional. And that was the moment I realized that I may not like it. I may not be a huge fan of it right now, but it might be the right way to go. Yet again. After about 3-4 weeks of really sitting down and thinking critically and challenging myself, let me be clear, it was a challenge to myself. It was a confrontation with myself and making myself let go of some things that ultimately aren't that important in order to make the book better. And while it has yet to be written, I do feel like this vision that I have currently, this sequence of events, especially about that middle 40%, is probably the strongest it's ever been. And I know that I said that last time, and I probably said it the time before that too, but I really do feel like the midpoint is so much more exciting now. So much more exciting now. I actually feel like the stakes are being raised. In the previous iteration, it just didn't, yes, kind of, they were being raised. This feels like a very, very intentional raising of the stakes. It also elevates a mystery that had kind of been on the back burner, just something that to tease the readers with, and now it's actually something that's being intentionally talked about. And again, that moment with this other character, it gives him layers and depth and something to explore in another book where he is intended to be a POV character. I'm hoping that I finally hit upon a winning formula. All I have to do now is sit down and actually write it. And I need to get a move on because you may recall from one of my last videos in January that I did book Brielle for a manuscript critique. It was actually supposed to be starting on May 1st, but obviously I missed that deadline because I haven't written anything. So I rescheduled for August 1st, which is in 2 months, legally speaking, 2 months. So I need to get a move on. And I'm kind of excited, actually. And to bring it all the way back to the beginning, all of the changes meant that that moment that kind of triggered this whole thing, that writer's block that I felt like it was a skill issue, I'm changing it. So that moment is no longer going to be configured in that way. And so I don't really feel as scared of it anymore. Like I just need to go in and write like a paragraph pretty much. And then I can move on from it. And so that like lifts such a massive burden. Yeah, so I'm feeling really, really good. I'm feeling really excited, and that's kind of where we're at now. All I need to do is just button, chair, fingers on keyboard. So I can't wait to see how this draft pans out now. It's gonna be a little bit frantic trying to make it on time. I only got about 15,000 words in when I left off at the beginning of February. I am aiming between 90 and 100,000. So I've got some wood to chop, to say the least, and it's not getting done sitting here talking to you. So with that, thank you so much for watching. I so appreciate it. If you like my content and want to support the channel, please like and subscribe or consider leaving a comment down below. I don't know what video I'm going to have next for you. I am still kind of getting back into the swing of things with content creation, and I haven't thought that far ahead about what kind of videos I'm going to be making. I do know I'm trying to film a vlog for you guys. Spoiler alert, it is not going very well. I think I made a critical error when I decided to start a writing vlog on my annual birthday staycation week, because the whole point of the week the whole point of taking the week off is to decompress from work. And so I'm doing that. And as a result, I'm not doing any writing. Either way, I hope you look forward to it, and I will see you then. Bye.